The rain followed them like it knew they had nowhere else to go, and Noah held one suitcase while Grace held the other, and neither spoke as they walked away from the house that had once felt like home. Their steps were slow, not because the road was long but because their hearts were heavy. The door behind them stayed closed, and no one called their names. The street was quiet except for the sound of water hitting the ground and cars passing without care. They had lived with family for years, believing love would last forever, but that night proved how quickly warmth can turn cold. Noah was old, but his back was still straight and his mind still clear. Grace walked beside him holding his arm. When the sidewalk cracked or dipped, she wanted to look strong for him, but her eyes kept filling with tears. She remembered birthdays, shared meals, and long talks that now felt like stories from another life. The city lights felt harsh and unfamiliar, and every window they passed reminded her that other people were safe inside while they were not. They walked until their legs ached and their hands were numb from the rain. The streets slowly changed from busy roads to quiet ones where shops were closed and buildings looked forgotten. Grass pushed through broken concrete and street signs leaned to one side like they were tired too. Grace stopped when she saw the mansion rising behind an iron gate. It was large and silent, and the paint on its walls had faded to a dull grey. A warning sign hung crooked on the gate saying the place was not safe. But the gate stood open like an invitation. Noah did not like the idea at first. He had always followed rules and avoided trouble, but the rain grew stronger and the wind cut through their clothes. Grace looked at him with tired eyes and said they just needed one night of rest. That was all she asked. The mansion did not look welcoming, but it looked dry, and sometimes that is enough. They stepped through the gate and the sound of the city faded behind them. Inside the mansion, the air felt still and cool. Dust floated in the light coming through broken windows. Their footsteps echoed across a wide hall with a high ceiling and old decorations clinging to the walls like memories that refused to leave. Furniture stood covered in white sheets, and the floor showed cracks that ran like thin lines across stone. Grace held her breath, expecting someone to appear and tell them to leave, but no one came. The house felt empty but not angry. They moved slowly through the rooms, choosing a small space near the back where the roof seemed strong and the walls felt less damaged. Noah laid the blanket down and Grace sat beside him. They shared a quiet look filled with unspoken fear and relief. They were tired beyond words and hunger pressed softly at their stomachs, but sleep came anyway as the storm outside softened and the mansion stayed silent around them. Morning light woke them gently. Birds perched somewhere above and the sound of wings felt comforting. Grace stood and stretched her stiff legs, then walked through the nearby rooms. She found old paintings and dusty shelves and a long table covered with marks from another time. She imagined people once laughing there and wondered where they had gone. Some doors were broken, some rooms empty, but one door caught her attention because it looked different. The door was heavy and made of dark wood with a metal latch that looked newer than anything else around it. The floor near it felt cool under her feet, and when Noah tapped it the sound felt hollow like something hidden below. He looked at Grace with curiosity rather than fear, because when a person has lost everything, even mystery feels lighter than pain. Grace placed her hand on the door and felt a strange calm. Her heart beat faster, but not from worry. It felt like the mansion was holding a secret and somehow trusted them with its presence. They stepped back and decided not to open it, yet the day was still young and they needed food and strength. But as they sat together sharing a piece of bread Noah found in his pocket, both felt it clearly. Their lives had already changed. They had come seeking shelter from the rain and found more than a roof. They found a place that felt like it had been waiting. The mansion stood quiet around them, old and forgotten, yet steady beneath its floors. Something rested unseen, and the couple did not know it yet, but the ground under their tired feet held a truth that would turn their loss into something no one could ever take away. Morning settled slowly over the mansion and Noah stepped outside to feel the air on his face. The rain had washed the dust away and the sky looked pale and quiet. Grace followed him holding her coat close, and for a moment they stood in silence listening to birds and distant traffic. It felt strange to wake up without fear of a door closing behind them. The mansion had not rejected them, and that alone felt like kindness. They spent the early hours exploring carefully. Noah checked the walls and ceilings while Grace gathered what little dry wood she could find. The house was old but strong, and the deeper rooms felt solid, like they had been protected from time. In one corner Grace found a small kitchen space with a working sink, and she smiled softly. Small things felt big now, and every discovery gave them hope. As the day passed they noticed the locked door again. It sat quietly as if waiting. Noah tried to ignore it, but his thoughts kept returning to the hollow sound beneath the floor. Grace felt it too, a pull she could not explain. They spoke little, but their eyes often drifted toward that door like it was part of the room breathing with them. By late afternoon hunger pushed them outside. They walked to a nearby store using the little money Noah had saved for emergencies. The walk felt lighter than the night before. Even though their pockets were nearly empty, they shared a warm meal sitting on the mansion steps, and for the first time in weeks they laughed softly at an old memory. It surprised them both. When they returned inside, the light had shifted and shadows filled the long halls. The locked door stood darker than before. Noah picked up an old metal rod he had found and tested the latch. It was firm but worn. Grace watched with mixed fear and excitement. She trusted Noah, and more than that she trusted the feeling in her chest. With careful effort the latch gave way. The sound echoed through the mansion and both froze, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The door opened slowly, revealing narrow steps leading down into darkness. A cool breeze rose from below carrying the smell of earth and metal. They did not rush. Noah found an old lantern and lit it with shaking hands. The light revealed stone walls smooth and strong. The steps continued deeper than expected, and each one felt like a step away from their old life. Grace held the rail and focused on her breathing, reminding herself they had already survived worse. At the bottom they reached a wide underground room reinforced with thick beams and sealed doors along the sides. Wooden crates lined the walls, each marked with symbols they did not understand. The room felt hidden on purpose, not forgotten. Noah touched one crate and felt the weight beneath his hand. They opened the first crate slowly. Inside were sealed bars wrapped in thick plastic. Grace did not know what she was looking at, but she knew it mattered. Noah stared in silence, then sank to his knees. His hands trembled, not from fear but from shock. Crate after crate revealed the same thing, carefully stored and protected for decades. Papers lay on a metal table showing names and dates from long ago, a story of wealth hidden to escape loss and never returned. For Grace felt dizzy and held the table to steady herself. They did not shout or celebrate. They sat on the cold floor holding hands, letting the truth settle. They were no longer just survivors seeking shelter. They were caretakers of something enormous and dangerous if handled wrong. As night fell they closed the room and locked the door again. Returning upstairs they felt the mansion differently now, like it was no longer empty but fulfilled. Noah looked at Grace and whispered that they needed to be careful. She nodded, knowing that while the ground beneath them held answers, the world above could still take everything if they moved too fast. They lay down that night, unable to sleep but peaceful in a way they had not felt in years. Beneath them rested a fortune, but more importantly a second chance, and for the first time since being turned away they felt chosen instead of discarded. The days after the discovery moved slowly but felt heavy with meaning. Noah and Grace woke each morning with the same thought resting in their minds, but they did not speak about it right away. They cleaned the mansion, repaired small things, and acted like nothing had changed on the outside. Inside their hearts were racing with questions and careful hope. Grace spent hours sitting near the window watching people pass on the street below. She wondered how many would change if they knew what rested under the old floor. Noah spent his time reading the papers they had found underground. He traced names, dates, and notes written by hands long gone. The story spoke of fear, loss, and the choice to hide rather than trust. They agreed to tell no one. Not yet. Wealth had a way of changing how people looked at each other, and they had already learned how quickly love could fade. They were old but not careless, and they understood that safety mattered more than excitement. One afternoon a city worker arrived at the gate holding a clipboard. He explained the building was scheduled for inspection soon and possible removal. Noah felt his chest tighten, but he stayed calm. Grace offered the man water and listened quietly as he spoke. She noticed his tired eyes and kind voice. After he left, they sat together in silence. The mansion was no longer just shelter, it was their anchor, and the secret beneath it tied them to the past and the future at once. They knew they could not stay invisible forever. Noah suggested finding a lawyer, someone honest and experienced. Grace worried about trust but agreed. They chose carefully, asking questions before sharing anything. When they finally revealed a small part of the truth, the reaction was quiet disbelief followed by careful interest. The process began slowly. Papers were reviewed, records checked, and the hidden room documented. The lawyer spoke of steps, patience, and protection. Noah listened closely and asked thoughtful questions. Grace watched his face and felt proud. He had always been steady even when the world pushed him aside. News did not spread because they moved with care. The lawyer arranged protection and legal recognition of the find. The mansion was paused from removal while history was verified. Each day brought progress but also tension. Grace sometimes felt overwhelmed. She would sit alone and remember the night they were turned away, the rain, the silence, the feeling of being unwanted. She wondered how the same world could now hold such different truths. Noah always found her then, holding her hand, reminding her that worth did not come from wealth but survival had brought them here. As weeks passed, officials came and went. Some treated them with respect, others with doubt, but none could change the facts buried beneath stone and time. The hidden fortune had been real and untouched, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. One evening they returned to the underground room together. Noah ran his hand along the stone wall and whispered thanks. Grace closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The room felt calm, like it had completed its purpose. They talked about what they would do, not grand plans but simple ones, a small home, support for others like them, quiet days without fear. They wanted no spotlight, only peace. Above them the mansion stood stronger than before. Repairs had begun and light filled the halls. The house that once waited in silence now felt alive again. They went to bed that night holding hands, knowing challenges still waited, but they were no longer alone in the world or in their struggle. The ground beneath them had given more than wealth, it had given proof that endings could turn into beginnings even when hope felt long gone. The final weeks passed with a calm that felt earned rather than given. Noah and Grace moved through each day with purpose but without rush. They had learned that patience protected them better than speed. The legal steps reached their end quietly and the fortune was secured in a way that kept their names safe and their lives unchanged. On the surface to the world they were still an elderly couple living in an old mansion, but inside they carried a steady peace. The mansion was no longer marked for removal, instead it was recognized as a historical place and plans were made to restore it. With care, workers came during the day and left before night, always respectful, always unaware of the deeper story. Grace watched them from a distance, smiling softly as walls were strengthened and windows repaired. The house that once sheltered them in silence now stood proud again. Noah spent time walking the halls each morning, touching the walls and floors as if greeting an old friend. He remembered the night they arrived cold and unwanted and felt gratitude rise in his chest. The mansion had given them more than safety, it had given them dignity when they had none left. They chose not to return to the family who turned them away, not from anger but from clarity. Some doors once closed did not need reopening. They wrote a short letter wishing peace and moved forward without waiting for reply. Their hearts felt lighter after that choice. With guidance, they quietly set aside funds to help others like them, elderly people facing loss and quiet hardship. Support was given without names or attention. Grace insisted on that. She knew how heavy pride could feel when mixed with need. Noah agreed, believing kindness worked best when it did not ask for praise. One afternoon they sat together on the mansion steps watching the sun dip low. Grace leaned against Noah and spoke about simple joys, warm meals, safe nights, and the sound of rain without fear. Noah listened and smiled, knowing these were the true riches they had found. The underground room was sealed again, not hidden but protected. Its purpose had been fulfilled. The wealth no longer felt like a secret but a tool resting quietly in the background. They rarely spoke of it now. Months later the mansion stood fully restored. People passed by admiring it without knowing the story beneath its floors. Noah and Grace moved through its rooms with ease, laughing softly and sharing memories. They hosted small gatherings for neighbors and friends made along the way, creating warmth where emptiness once lived. At night they slept peacefully, holding hands, feeling the steady presence of the home around them. They had been pushed aside, forgotten and tested, but they had endured. The world had not changed suddenly, but they had, and sometimes that was enough. In the end they did not feel chosen by fortune, they felt chosen by resilience, by staying together, by stepping forward when everything told them to stop. The mansion had waited for someone who would listen, and in finding shelter they had found a future. Their story did not end with wealth, it ended with belonging.